Staples Print Big Sale means the more you print, the more you save. Get $20 off your print purchase of $100 or more, $50 off your print purchase of $200 or more, and $100 off your print purchase of $300 or more. Ends 2/10/24. See staples.com/print for details. Print more, save more at Staples.
Is this the title?
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Both of LA's NBA teams are on the road today. The Lakers are at Houston. The Lakers are over 500 for the first time since December 30th. 5 p.m. tip-off in Houston. The Clippers are in Cleveland. Game 3 of a 7-game Eastern road trip. The Clippers have won 5 straight. They are just 1 game behind Oklahoma City and Minnesota for the best record in the Western Conference. 4 p.m. tip-off in Cleveland. The Kansas City Chiefs are in the Super Bowl for the 2nd straight year. They beat Baltimore to win the AFC title. The Chiefs will play the 49ers in the Super Bowl February 11th in Las Vegas. The 49ers held on for a 3-point win over Detroit to claim the NFC title. Students and alumni at Florida A&M finally have a new head football coach after a month-long search. Assistant coach James Cozy was promoted to take over the HBCU program. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Climate is king.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we believe that caring for the community means caring about the climate. You might have heard that we announced a pretty bold 12-month, $2 million campaign to do 4 things. Increase climate literacy, turn up the volume on communities of color in the climate conversation, connect everyday people with the resources they need to survive and thrive, and highlight frontline climate justice crusaders of color throughout this year. KBLA Talk 1580 will be bringing you insightful interviews on all of our shows to help raise your climate IQ. Each quarter this year, we will also be hosting free climate events in various communities throughout the city with food, fun, and forward-thinking conversations. Thanks to partners like LADWP, Metro, Caltrans, the Sierra Club, the California Community Foundation, the California Endowment, AQMD, MWD, and more. You'll also be hearing more about a couple of national town halls broadcasting live from Los Angeles, to which you will be invited. And we'll be rolling out a robust social media campaign on all our platforms, as well as an outdoor media campaign, all designed to educate, enlighten, and empower you in our fight for climate justice.
We want cleaner air.
Caring about the community means caring about the climate. At KBLA Talk 1580, we believe that we really can change the world if we care enough. If we care enough. If we care enough. If we care enough. If we care enough.
Outstanding. Girl, you knock me up. Exciting. You make me wanna shout.
Girl, you looking sweet tonight. You find it every day, girl. Wish that I could love you right in a special way, girl. You light my fire.
Congratulations once again to Uncle Charlie Wilson, the recipient of a Hollywood star on the Walk of Fame today. And that's a big deal. I mentioned earlier a couple hours ago, I know something of this, having experienced that maybe a decade ago, something like that. One of the great days of my life. As I know, Charlie had an amazing time, he is having an amazing time today, just celebrating this major milestone in his career, getting a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He should have had one a long time ago, as far as I'm concerned. As I said earlier, all the hits with the Gap Band, all the hits, the solo hits, say nothing of his work and witness and his testimony. He is not afraid to share his testimony anywhere and everywhere he goes. So congratulations to our friend and brother, Uncle Charlie Wilson today, unveiling the star, his star, on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. It's our third and final hour, and I've been telling you all day, for the last 2 hours at least, that I was looking forward to this conversation. Looking forward to it because I think this is a low point, another low point. There have been many in our democracy. And I wanted to spend an hour really sort of unpacking what happened in Alabama. And I am pleased to have Professor Joy James with us in this hour, who I'll introduce here more robustly in just a moment. But let me just tell you, you all saw the news about this brother, this man Kenneth Smith, who was put to death, executed in Alabama. I mentioned earlier in today's program that the states, doing some research on this last night, preparing for Professor James, the two states that last year executed more people than all the other states combined, basically, Florida and Texas. This happened in Alabama, but Florida and Texas lead this country still in executions. But this happened in Alabama, and let me just give you some backstory, and then we'll bring in Professor James, brilliant philosopher, for the rest of this hour. So, who was Kenneth James and Kenneth Smith, rather? She's Joy James. His name is Kenneth Smith, the executed. Who was Kenneth Smith? Pardon me. And what was his crime? Here's the quick backstory. So, Kenneth Eugene Smith was 58 and was one of 3 men convicted in the stabbing murder of Elizabeth Dorleen Sennett, who was 45, when her husband, a church pastor, recruited these 3 men to kill her in March of 1988 in Colbert County, Alabama. According to court documents, Ms. Sennett, a mother of 2, was stabbed 10 times in the attack by Mr. Smith and another man. Charles Sennett Sr., Ms. Sennett's husband, had recruited these men to handle her killing, and they in turn recruited Mr. Smith and another man. So Mr. Sennett hired a particular man, we are told, who then recruited Mr. Kenneth Smith and another man to aid and abet him in this murder of Mr. Sennett's wife. Mr. Sennett, we are told, Pastor Sennett, arranged the murder in part to collect an insurance policy that he had taken out on his wife. According to court records, he had promised the men $1,000 each for the killing. That was their takeaway. $1,000 each they were promised for killing the pastor's wife, a killing that he set in place. In November of 2022, the state of Alabama tried to execute Mr. Smith using lethal injection. But that night, a team of correctional facility workers tried and repeatedly failed to insert an intravenous line into Mr. Smith's arms and hands. Eventually, they tried a vein near his heart. But finally, after multiple attempts, prison officials decided that they did not have the time to carry out the execution before the death warrant expired at midnight. So because they couldn't get this this line in his arm, this intravenous line in his arm, kept failing at that attempt. The clock is running out. These states all issued death warrants, and the death warrant had to be carried out by a certain time. And they realized they weren't going to have time to carry it out by midnight before the death warrant expired. And so miraculously, pretty amazingly, Kenneth Smith survived the attempt to execute him back in 2022. But that did not stop the state of Alabama from coming back in 2024. And in 2024, rather than lethal injection, they decided to gas him, to suffocate him to death. And so for the first time ever on record, we now know that a state in this country has used nitrogen gas to put someone to death. I'm looking forward to the dialogue in this hour because there are many of you, including black folk. I know a whole lot of black folk who are not against the death penalty. Many of us are. We're against it. We want to abolish it. But there are others who are not against the death penalty, and you are certainly entitled to your own opinion. But what is incontrovertible is the way we go about applying the death penalty in this country. The data is incontrovertible. And even if you believe in the death penalty, are you okay with suffocating for 22 minutes somebody to death? That's what it took, 22 minutes for him to finally die from suffocation. We don't want to call it what it is, but that's exactly what it is. Suffocated for 22 minutes. Talk about cruel and unusual. Talk about pain and suffering. Talk about torture. Even if you're for the death penalty, are you down with that? The conversation with Professor Joy James commences when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Interrogating and unpacking. That's what we do around here. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? this isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
The possibility of lung cancer can be pretty scary, especially if you're one of approximately 8 million current or former smokers at high risk. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know that now there's a breakthrough low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early, and it only takes 60 seconds. You stop smoking, now start screening. For an easy quiz to see if you're eligible, visit SaveByTheScan.org. It could save your life. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
We all agree that America has a very serious problem.
Okay, KBLA delegation, we need your help as we launch our 2024 Climate Justice Campaign. We would deeply appreciate you going to our KBLA 1580 website and filling out a short climate justice survey, which will help us better serve our beloved community as we build out this campaign. It'll take you just a few short minutes to complete the online survey, and the information you provide us will be invaluable as we do our part to hold folk accountable and amplify the voices of our people in this climate conversation. When you take the survey, you'll be automatically entered to win seats at our annual Black History Month luncheon, Thursday, February 29th. So, hit our website at KBLA 1580. Help us out by taking the short climate justice campaign survey, and you could be our guest at our annual Black History Month luncheon, Thursday, February 29th. Thank you in advance for your consideration and cooperation. At KBLA Talk 1580, we care about the community, we care about the climate. We care about the climate.
What's up? I'm Danelle Riley, FAMU alumni and creator of the HBCU Culture Shop. I am so proud of my new partnership with Black Beyond Measure and Target. They help me elevate community pride with my HBCU designs and continue to support Black creators in artists, scholarship programs, and campus collaborations. Let's come together this homecoming season and beyond. Shop my brand and discover other Black-owned products at target.com/blackbeyondmeasure.
Who do you trust to get at the truth?
Tavis Smiley.
That's who. The conversation continues right now.
It does indeed. So now that I've given you the backstory to who Kenneth Smith is, what his the crime was he was accused of and found guilty of, and how they tried to execute him in 2022, came back again in 2024. He survived the lethal injection then. So now they enter nitrogen gas into the situation, and he is the first American that we know of who has been put to death, gassed to death basically by nitrogen. And the question is whether or not that represents a low point in this so-called democracy. Joy James is an author and professor of humanities and political science at Williams College, and I'm delighted to have this philosopher on our program. Professor James, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. You know, it's under very serious conditions and discussion, but I appreciate being able to speak with you and your audience, you know, about what we're facing.
No, I'm glad to have you on. And let me just say at the outset, I specifically, I have a number of brilliant philosophers who are in my Rolodex. Many of them you hear on this program are routinely, but this is one of those moments where I wanted to talk specifically and unapologetically to a philosopher, not a politician. We did talk to the former governor of Ohio, Professor James, earlier in today's program, Dick Celeste. When he was governor of Ohio, he commuted a number of death row inmate sentences. And so he knows something about what it means to be the governor who has the opportunity to commute. And he took advantage of that a number of times when he was governor, again, of the Buckeye State. That did not happen, of course, in Alabama, and the Supreme Court did not get involved to stay the life of Kenneth Smith. But I don't even know where to start. Broadly speaking, let me just ask you this, and we'll move through this hour and kind of narrow it, I guess. But your opening salvo, your opening thoughts about what all this means.
Well, just as a person and as a citizen, however we describe that, and I include everyone who's here in this country as being part of the democracy, which is an ongoing project that keeps, falling off the rails because of state violence. We're facing violence on so many registers, right? And even the way you described it, and you were clear, you were precise, but even the description of that murder of that mother and that wife, obviously married to the wrong person, that was horrific. But we can't respond to one horror with another form of horror, particularly if the people who hold the levers of the machine. I mean, it takes 22 minutes to die because you want to do an experimental execution because you've run out of lethal injection drugs. So it's the machinery of death that we have to confront, and then we have to figure a way to bring it to a halt.
What do you? I love the phrase, although I hate what's behind it. But I hear the phrase and it jumped out at me that this is a part of a machinery of death. That's your phrase, machinery of death. What do you make of America's fascination, America's embrace? There's a better word of America's activation. I could do this all day long of this machinery of death, Professor James.
Oh yeah, the U.S., right? Because we got North, Central, South. The Americas. This is a very long, horrible play on genocide. We could, this is such an important question. I'm started stuttering over it because it's just so massive. The country was built on death. The accumulation, like how do you get the land? Through killing, right? Through genocide of indigenous. After you traffic and put them into slavery, like, shipping people down to the Caribbean, dying incredibly fast rates, you need more labor. What do? You go to the continent, and then you get us. So war on land, a war for death and capture on land, war on water, the Atlantic, where it's uncountable how many people of African descent died, and then war on new land when you come to the Americas or to the United States. The nation has accumulated its wealth, its prestige, its power, basically through death. And I think it's difficult for us to grapple with that because we pay taxes. Either, it's local, state, or federal taxes. So you're paying for these executions. Whether I was listening to, your news feeds and updates, before we came on in this conversation, but there's a discussion of Tyree Nichols' family suing, right? The Memphis Police. You could think about other executions. You could think about Troy Davis, who the Pope asked for commutation, like not to be executed because the police had fabricated. And I know that's not the case here, but so much of death, it comes too easily to the state. And I guess that's why I called it a machinery, because if it felt like humans who had sensibilities, who had emotional registers, who understood grief, understood trauma, who could listen to what the families wanted, right? Who could listen to what the community wanted, they wouldn't be so efficient in killing, both abroad and at, quote, home. And so I think we have a massive problem on our hands here. There's the way that people are dying as individuals and people are dying en masse. And the state machinery, which is a form of war machinery, you can see these executions as a form of warfare. And if you think back to our history as Black people, right? Because I was thinking a lot while I was listening again to the intro, and so much information about culture and art and sports and protecting the environment. But I was also thinking about history. If the state had had its way, they would have killed Ida B. Wells. If the state had had its way, with Governor Ronald Reagan, he would have put Angela Davis to death. We want justice, but a machine of death is not a form of justice. It is a form of control.
There's so many, I could do this all day long if I had the time. There's so many contradictions in this country. And again, I don't have time to walk through all of them, but I'm listening to you intently, and as you break this down so brilliantly, particularly the part about the state-sanctioned violence, this machinery of death. I'm still on that. I'm going to move in a second, but I ain't ready to move yet. I want to stay with this notion of state-sanctioned violence and this notion of this machinery of death, as you put it. And what I'm thinking now, Professor James, is how one juxtaposes all of that. How do you juxtapose this state-sanctioned violence? How do you juxtapose this machinery of death with the other notion that we advance of in God we trust, that we are a nation that believes in the Creator, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If I had time, I could break this down. I don't need to for you because you see exactly where I'm going. It's a glaring contradiction, right? That we believe in a God. It's on our tender. We believe in a God who gives life. We believe that God is supreme. We believe that God is sovereign, and yet He gives life, and we think that we are somehow endowed with the ability to make a decision to take life. There's a serious contradiction here. There are many others, but let's just start with that, with the contradiction that is America, at least as it relates to the ideals that we profess.
Yeah, America was always a project for accumulation, but also a portrait of hypocrisy. It's in God we trust. I mean, commerce, America trusts, or the United States trusts. Like in accumulation we trust, in domination we trust, in militarism we trust. Like I would give an example about death. So I grew up in a military family, right, with an officer. And, at one point, my politics shifted, right? I'm grateful for that. But at one point, I'm a military brat. And so I'm going to be an ROTC. And a lot of this trust, that you place in the government and the whole notion of loyalty and discipline and following orders and so forth, on and on and on. It's drilled into us, literally drilled, just like a military performance of a regime, of conformity. But what I remember is the contradictions that the black officers had. Because my father was an officer in Vietnam, and that means that, they knew what they were doing. They would also say, I'm not going to be a cook, I'm going to be an officer, I'm going to take this job under, the imprint of an empire we trust. I'll just call it that. But you end up, right, losing your soul if you engage in a loyalty oath to a machine that reproduces death. 55,000 U.S. service people or personnel die. 2 to 3 million Vietnamese die. The latter is a genocide. And somehow you have to reconcile, how is it that this country that is supposed to be so caring and so forward-thinking, like the shining light or whatever on the hill, how is it that it is so steeped in violence, in the culture, in the lynching, in the dishonor, in the, it is ongoing slaughter. Even if it's not physical slaughter, it's the evisceration of your dignity as being a person of African descent, of having a child who's non-binary, of having a woman who needs care and reproductive rights. This is a very intrusive democracy that seeks control through various forms of violence. If we cannot control it, and that's a real thing.
Yeah.
because we were actually the objects of its capture. And also, we generated its wealth through all that labor, right? But if we cannot control it, we should be very, very skeptical about validating it.
Mm-hmm. That's powerful. What do you see as the price, or the price is, that the demos pays for being in a republic that is so steeped in violence?
Yeah, I think it's that shining thing on the hill. We like what glitters, right? But it's not gold, right?
Mhm.
It's fool's gold. So, like, if you go back to Athens, ancient Greek culture was supposed to be like this, highbrow. I don't even have the words right now because I'm so upset about the proximity of death and dishonor that we have to participate through this. But anyway, so this notion that a democracy, right, would have the people who are worthy of participation in deciding the rule of law or order, the advancement of culture. But if what we know of its, the architecture of its like template that it's reaching back to is that really only the elites could actually vote. And if you think of the way in which the Voting Rights Act is being eviscerated under the Supreme Court and how we had to fight for it and people had to lose their lives were taken by the state, by the Klan, by the police in order to have the right to vote, it's a slippery promise, right? Mm-hmm. It's already destabilized because it's so violent, but it's also destabilized because we as citizens or communities have little say about how the democracy conducts itself. It does a lot of performance play, like we're the only or the greatest democracy. We care about people, but then you ask, people died from poisoned water in Flint, Michigan. Isn't that a form of execution? People die when they're beaten to death. People die in the cold when they're unhoused. People die, through Serena Williams almost died giving birth, and she has money. But the way in which medical care is meted out, the way in which dishonor and brutality are meted out, why would you trust the state to be in charge of life and death? It is not a proxy God. It is a machinery.
You got my mind working here. I never thought about it in the way you just laid it out, that America really is executing people every day. This democracy executes people every day. You heard Professor James as clearly as I heard her. And I'm not talking about executing inside of a prison cell. I'm talking about what she's talking about. We execute black mothers when we don't give them good maternal health. We execute the homeless when we're out in the cold and they die. I don't need to repeat what she said. You heard her. But I never quite thought about the way we execute people every day in this country. Because, to her point, we are a nation that is steeped in violence. State-sanctioned violence, a machinery of death, as she put it. And I love her question. If you see the way we execute people every day in all kinds of spaces and places, then why would you trust the government to be the one to be in charge of this particular project? In case you've just tuned in, we're talking about the execution of Kenneth Smith, first American that we know of who the state suffocated to death with nitrogen gas. And when we come forward, I want to talk about the way they frame this as humanitarian. That's the way they framed it, that it was the humanitarian thing to do. To suffocate somebody for 22 minutes is humanitarian. And I want to get her take specifically on, this will be fun and interesting. I want to talk specifically about black folk and the death penalty, because not all of us are monolithic. We're not a monolith, obviously. We're all feel the same about this. And I got black friends who are for it, those who are against it. I want to have a broad conversation about black folk and the death penalty and how you could possibly be black and be for the death penalty. We'll talk about that part when we come forward with Professor Joy James on Tavis Smiley.
For all the freedom-loving folk, this is Tavis Smiley.
I feel like freedom.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. BenefitsCheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
We thank you for joining us. I'm Mike Moore. Now, here's the latest from the Black Information Network. New York writer E. Jean Carroll says she plans to use the money that she was awarded from a jury after former President Donald Trump defamed her on something he hates. That's according to comments she made on ABC's Good Morning America. Carroll said if it will cause Trump pain for her to give her money to certain things, then that's what she'll do. In Louisiana, a man has been found guilty again in the deadly shooting of former NFL Saints defensive end Will Smith. Carnell Hayes was convicted of manslaughter back in 2016 after he shot Smith following a dispute over a car crash. Hayes, who is African-American, served more than 4 years of his 25-year sentence before he was released due to a Supreme Court ruling. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Staples Print Big Sale means the more you print, the more you save. Get $20 off your print purchase of $100 or more, $50 off your print purchase of $200 or more, and $100 off your print purchase of $300 or more. Ends 2/10/24. See staples.com/print for details. Print more, save more at Staples.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Both of LA's NBA teams are on the road today. The Lakers are at Houston. The Lakers are over 500 for the first time since December 30th. 5 p.m. tip-off in Houston. The Clippers are in Cleveland. Game 3 of a 7-game Eastern road trip. The Clippers have won 5 straight. They are just 1 game behind Oklahoma City and Minnesota for the best record in the Western Conference. 4 p.m. tip-off in Cleveland. The Kansas City Chiefs are in the Super Bowl for the 2nd straight year. They beat Baltimore to win the AFC title. The Chiefs will play the 49ers in the Super Bowl February 11th in Las Vegas. The 49ers held on for a 3-point win over Detroit to claim the NFC title. Students and alumni at Florida A&M finally have a new head football coach after a month-long search. Assistant coach James Cozy was promoted to take over the HBCU program. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Got issues with youth or high school sports? Positive Coaching Alliance can help. PCA, a national nonprofit, offers more than 1,000 free online resources for youth and high school sports coaches, parents, students, and administrators. Visit PCADevZone.org.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Zoe Williams, a.k.a. the Voice of Reason, encouraging you to join me weekdays from 7 to 9 p.m. for the world's most intriguing relationship radio roundtable. Every night, I facilitate and encourage our loyal listeners to participate in the most engaging relationship discussions you'll hear anywhere. So make it a point to rendezvous with me, Zoe Williams, the Voice of Reason, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Trust me, your relationships will never be the same. The VOR is on fire tonight.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. Helping to broaden your political and moral imagination with our 2024 Climate Justice Campaign. We're KBLA Talk 1580.
Substance use disorder and addiction is so isolating. And so, as a Black woman in recovery, hope must be loud. It grows louder when you ask for help and you're vulnerable. It is the thread that lets you know that no matter what happens, you will be okay.
When we learn the power of hope, recovery is possible. Find out how at startwithhope.com. Brought to you by the National Council for Mental Wellbeing, Shatterproof, and the Ad Council.
You like your style, guy? At KBLA Talk 1580. We are unapologetic about amplifying the voices of those who have historically been left out of the conversation. As we approach our 3rd anniversary this summer, the problem with talk radio in Southern California specifically, and America more broadly, is virtually unchanged. All day, all night, all white. We make no apologies for our prime audience, but true to the best of our tradition, we're committed to expanding justice and freedom for all. So when we receive messages from listeners like Neil, we just smile.
I realize that I'm not your target demographic, but I love listening to your station as it is the only progressive station on the dial.
That's us. Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. Smart talk for curious people just like you. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Tavis Smiley and Williams College professor Joy James, brilliant philosopher, as we talk about the aftermath, or talk in the aftermath, of the execution of Kenneth Smith in Alabama, put to death with nitrogen gas. First time it's ever happened. It was an experiment, and the experiment resulted in 22 minutes of suffocation. My view is, and it's just my view, it's a low point in this experiment in democracy. I recognize that I don't have a monopoly on the truth. I recognize that there is the truth and there is the way to the truth. And I have to be humble enough to accept and respect the fact that others see things differently than me. But that's a great lead in, I hope, Professor Joy James, to the issue I said I wanted to talk about when we came forward. And now that we are here, your sense of how, and again, I don't want to indict black folk or others, people of color who feel differently than me, as I said a moment ago, but it's always a fascinating conversation for me to talk to black folk who are in favor of the death penalty. It's a fascinating conversation. I guess the question is, without indicting those who have different opinions, how do we go about best having a conversation inside of Black America about the death penalty? Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I would say, because we're deep in our culture and we're deeply committed to our families, our families are no more perfect than other families, but our families are under more duress and stress because of the anti-Black history and the anti-Black racism that structures the United States. I mean, this is in part how it becomes an empire. So the way that I look at it is we have privilege, to within certain parameters, right, to be for or against something, but we don't have protections if things go wrong, right? And so sometimes it's great to exercise your privilege, but maybe it would be better to be more cautious about the death penalty than green lighting it. Because the history of our lives collectively and historically have been tied to lynching and other ways, Emmett Till, which is a lynching. Like, our movements are started by extrajudicial killings that nobody does a day in prison for. Does that make sense? Like, we could be killed with impunity, and that's not just in the past tense. It's going to be in the present tense, and it's going to be in the future. And so our investment in our families over generations for our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren would be to ramp down the violence as best we can in communities, but especially by the state. It is not a proxy God. It would be okay, I'm just being really facetious there, if it could take life and restore it. But it doesn't do resurrections. Once it kills you, and badly, and does it badly. Like, now you can go to a firing squad in Utah, and that's starting to be the preference of choice for how to die at the hands of the state. What century are we in? There's a way. I'm trying to argue this, maybe not as well as I could, but your listeners, their discussion with their families and their communities, we can't let people kill us who cannot resurrect us. All right? I agree that some people need to be incarcerated, and I'm an abolitionist, but we are not always in the same note, not singing the same note, until we find an alternative space for people who engage in murder and heinous violent crimes, and there's not sufficient medical intervention or rehabilitation, whatever, then yes, they should be isolated so they don't harm other people and they don't harm themselves. But I never presume the right that a God has, that, as I understand my religion, right?
No,
I never assume that I can take life.
No, I take your point that we are not proxy gods. We are not. I further take your point, and I love the frame you put us in of privilege versus protection. We do have the privilege. We have the right to be for the death penalty if we choose to be so. That's our privilege. But when you juxtapose that, when you square that against the notion of protection and what happens to you or your family member when in a situation with melanin in your skin and you can't protect yourself, you can't protect them from it, you got to square. I take the point. You got to square your privilege with this notion of protection. I'm looking at a number of the responses that are coming in to this conversation, Professor James, and this is my favorite one so far. I asked the question, how can you be black and be for the death penalty? And somebody simply sent back a message and said, this is how for me, and that's their caption to a picture of Dylan Roof. It's a picture of Dylan Roof, and they just said very simply, Tavis, this is how for me. I feel that. You care to comment on that, Professor James? We all know who Dylan Roof was, of course.
I do.
Yeah.
Yes, and then the other person who just got the death penalty for shooting up the Tops grocery store in Buffalo several years ago. I can understand that, but if I can respectfully respond to your listener, remember when Obama went to the AME Emmanuel Church?
Can't forget it.
And he sang Amazing Grace and he wept. And that's our sign of humanity. That is not a sign of protection. So even executing, and there are a lot of white supremacists who don't get executed, who are engaged in killing black people, indigenous people, undocumented people. They're hunters, and we're supposed to be prey. So this is not an organized resistance to violence writ large. These are isolates that are promoted in media to make you feel reassured that something got done. No, there's a whole other crop of white nationalists who would be happy to do ethnic cleansing.
Yeah.
And so, again, it's important that we have mechanisms not to rely on governance to, quote, save us or punish in our name, but we have a way to be citizens that we can shape our future and our trajectory.
To your point about the humanity that Barack Obama as president put on display in that moment, singing Amazing Grace, and you'll recall the families, many of those families came out and forgave Dylan Roof. He ain't even asked for forgiveness, but they forgave him. You recall the judge down in Texas who came off the bench and hugged the white policewoman who walked into the apartment. The black woman judge came off the bench and hugged the white woman, the white police officer who walked into the wrong apartment and killed the brother. There are all sorts of examples I could offer. I don't need to. I got a smart audience of the ways in which black humanity is put on display in critical moments for the nation like these. But one has to juxtapose, again, there's that word juxtapose. One has to square those realities, those images, those moments against the point that you're making that it is the state that sanctions violence against us. So we put our humanity on display in moments like these, but that same state that we are a part of, we are fellow citizens in this republic, that same state puts more black and brown people to death every single year while we're putting our humanity on display. How does one square those two things? Professor James will respond to that when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
From Leimert Park with love, this is Tavis Smiley.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we do Black history every single day. In fact, as the only Black talk radio station west of the Mississippi, we are Black history. Our annual Black History Month luncheon is fast approaching, and we want to be sure to give you ample time to get your company, organization, church, or group to join us at this year's celebration on the last day of the month, Thursday, February 29th at noon. Last year, we honored iconic local Black media personalities, including Pat Harvey, Jim Hill, Mark Brown, Beverly White, Sandy Banks, and Pat Prescott, and raised $20,000 in scholarships. This year, we're honoring Black Hollywood creatives who have used their artistic genius as climate justice champions. At this year's luncheon, we will be showcasing and sharing their inspiring work on our big screen. Plus, a scrumptious meal, live music, great company, and lots of fun with your favorite KBLA Talk 1580 hosts. So contact us today at info@smileyaudio.com or call 323-290-4690. That's info@smileyaudio.com or call 323-290-4690. We hope to see you Thursday, February 29th as we close out Black History Month. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your Black.
Every business seeks an advantage, whether it's having the best location, hiring top talent, or spotting trends before they happen. And now, the United States Postal Service can give your business a new advantage. Introducing USPS Ground Advantage. Reliable and affordable 2 to 5 day package shipping. It's the advantage you need at the price you want. Get the Ground Advantage at USPS.com/advantage. The United States Postal Service, delivering for America.
Let's get back to more of Tavis Smiley right now.
More Professor Joy James right now. Professor James, let me just jump right to it. How do you balance our being Black folk, our always being willing to put on display our humanity against the state's barbarity? Professor James, can you hear me? I cannot hear you.
Yes, I can.
There you go. There you go. How do you balance our humanity with the state's barbarity?
I don't think that we can balance it. I think we have to build our cultures of resistance. And always watch out for Trojan horses. Mm-hmm. I mean, people perform that they care. I mean, obviously that pastor performed as if he cared and loved his wife until he didn't, and he wanted a monetary cash out. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to say the state is different from the pastor, but I'm also going to say that the state functions in some ways that seems pretty similar to the pastor, right? Mm-hmm. That as long as it can gain, extract, exploit, accumulate, you have some value and some longevity. When you're disposable, you're disposable. And even as we individually, like through your work, Tavis, through the work that your listeners do, their contributions, like, yes, we can see ourselves moving forward, but that doesn't mean that the state has agreed that it would treat us with the level of humanity, respect, and safety that we deserve. It is a predatory state. Again, I'm going to be repetitive. This is how it got to be this rich. Mm-hmm. And so what makes us think that in these individual, prosecutions or these individual executions, that's a signal that the state is safe for us and our children and grandchildren? That's not a real promissory note. That's a performance play.
Yeah.
If you can't stop the killing, then you don't trust the killer.
Mm-hmm. I like that. If you can't stop the killer, you don't, trust the killer. For me, it's. I mean, you are brilliant because you're a professor at Williams College, and I'm just a lowly talk show host. But I will tell you this.
Please stop.
I will tell you this. For me, and I'll give you a litany of reasons why it's difficult for me to be black and for the death penalty. I'll give you a lot of reasons I've had the time. But the one that that always resonates for me or resonates with me, and again we've stated this already, is that it's difficult for me to support anything that brings disproportionate harm, and in this case, death, to black people. It's just that simple for me. Anything that brings disproportionate harm or death to black people, I cannot be for. It's hypocritical to the core to say that we believe in the death penalty for some folk, but not for other folk. And so anything, anywhere, anytime, you catch me in the middle of the night, I don't care what it is, if it disproportionately harms, maims, murders, kills black people, I can never be for that thing, whatever it is. I digress. Our remaining moments with Professor Joy James when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Unapologetically progressive. Unapologetically black. You're tapped into Tavis Smiley.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles is a nonprofit law firm that protects and advances the rights of the most underserved, leveling the playing field and ensuring that everyone can have access to the justice system. Every year, LAFLA provides free, high-quality legal services to more than 100,000 people living in poverty across greater Los Angeles. Their unique combination of neighborhood offices, self-help centers at courthouses, and domestic violence clinics puts Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles on the front lines in vulnerable communities and at the forefront of change. LAFLA's expert team of attorneys, paralegals, and support staff works to provide direct representation, offer counsel and advice, provide referrals, and educate the community about their legal rights through workshops and seminars. With locations all over LA, you can access their services or volunteer to help no matter where you live. And if you have an urgent issue, call 213-235-0060. That's 213-235-0060. To get legal help, make a donation, or volunteer, visit LAFLA.org. LAFLA.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Jim Gaffigan here with some more Straight Talk. Now you can get a Walmart Plus membership, plus not pay for it, because it's included with Straight Talk wireless plans. You get free delivery with Walmart Plus a Paramount Plus subscription included. Plus, you pay less for gas. That's a lot of pluses.
Only Straight Talk gives you unlimited 5G data and Walmart Plus included on select plans for free.
Straight Talk Wireless, available at Walmart.
Requires service on Gold or Platinum Unlimited. One offer per eligible account. Paramount Plus Essential Plan only. Separate registration required. Additional terms apply.
He's rooting for everybody black. Everybody black. More of Tavis Smiley coming your way right now.
Just got a few minutes left here between now and the top of the hour to wrap this conversation with Professor Joy James, Professor of Humanities and Political Science at Williams College. We've been talking in this hour, in case you've just tuned in the aftermath of the execution of Kenneth Smith in Alabama, where they used nitrogen gas. He survived a lethal injection, where it they thought it was going to be a lethal injection in 2022, and he survived that. So the state of Alabama comes back in 2024 and says, "Okay, we got something else. We got something else for you, brother." And they suffocate him to death over 22 minutes with nitrogen gas. And so the application of the death penalty in this country is not just disproportionately racist, but now we've gone to another level, or a new low, in my mind, to my point of view, by suffocating people to death over again a 22-minute period. That is how he was put to death in Alabama, and the Supreme Court did not step in, obviously, to stay that execution. I guess the extra question here in the 3 minutes I have left, Professor James, is whether or not your sense is, because it certainly is my sense, that now that this has happened one time, it ain't going to be one and done. There'll be other states and across the country who, in the application of the death penalty, will, may use this nitrogen gas as their process and their procedure. I just don't think that, as horrific as this was, we have seen the end of this this nitrogen gas thing. Your take?
Yeah, I agree with you. I won't, I don't want to be flip and say they're just getting started, but there are going to be innovative ways to kill people with chemicals, and it's experimentation as well. I mean, this is what the military also does. It tries out different mechanisms of death. And I would say, on a positive note, there are organizations and there are intellectuals such as yourself and your listeners who can discern when the state actually cares about you and when it's just running a narrative so that it can control life and death, which is really not its function. So the FTP movement, Common Notions, this year, 2024, really are, sharing texts and documentaries about how we could amplify our resources of care, but also protection for our communities in cultures of resistance. And I want to end with one thing. It's like meditating on Erica Garner, the daughter of Eric Garner. So he was killed by the NYPD in 2014, the same year Michael Brown was killed by police. And Ferguson, the same year that 12-year-old Tamir Rice was killed by police in Ohio. And so the daughter transitioned from, health issues after giving birth, but also just the stress of bringing honor and justice to her father. Yeah. These deaths are having an impact to us, even if we don't know about it. There is going to be a level of stress that is going to impact all of us if this death roll continues as it is, in a very barbaric and horrific way, with no avenue out to reconstruct a democracy that is functional, that can contain violence without performing it as a god.
Professor Joy James, author of any number of texts, and professor of humanities and political science at Williams College. They're keeping her busy, but not so busy that she couldn't give us an hour in conversation today. Professor James, I've enjoyed it immensely. Thanks for your insights. Good to have you on this program. We'll do it again somewhere down the road, and all the best to you.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on. That's our program today. 3 hours gone, just like that. Back here tomorrow, Lord willing, to do it all over again. 3 more hours. Until then, thanks for tuning in. Congratulations to Charlie Wilson on his star on the Walk of Fame today. And as always, keep the faith.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
We thank you for joining us. I'm Mike Moore. Now, here's the latest from the Black Information Network. New York writer E. Jean Carroll says she plans to use the money that she was awarded from a jury after former President Donald Trump defamed her on something he hates. That's according to comments she made on ABC's Good Morning America. Carroll said if it will cause Trump pain for her to give her money to certain things, then that's what she'll do. In Louisiana, a man has been found guilty again in the deadly shooting of former NFL Saints defensive end Will Smith. Carnell Hayes was convicted of manslaughter back in 2016 after he shot Smith following a dispute over a car crash. Hayes, who is African-American, served more than 4 years of his 25-year sentence before he was released due to a Supreme Court ruling. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Staples Print Big Sale means the more you print, the more you save. Get $20 off your print purchase of $100 or more, $50 off your print purchase of $200 or more, and $100 off your print purchase of $300 or more. Ends 2/10/24. See staples.com/print for details. Print more, save more at Staples.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The early odds from Vegas list the 49ers as a 3-point favorite over Kansas City in Super Bowl 68. The Chiefs are in the Super Bowl for the 4th time in 5 years. In case you haven't heard, Usher is performing at halftime. If you're thinking about trying to get a ticket to see the game in person in Vegas, be prepared to dig deep in your bank account. The average low price is starting at $6,700. Super Bowl 68 in Vegas on February 11th, 3:30 kickoff on CBS. Top 5 men's college basketball teams in this week's AP poll: UConn, Purdue, North Carolina, Houston, and Tennessee. Arizona is ranked 11th. They are the only Pac-12 conference team in the top 25. Top 5 women's teams this week: South Carolina, Kansas State, Iowa, Stanford, and North Carolina State. Recent losses have dropped UCLA and USC out of the top 5. UCLA fell to 7th. USC is now 15th. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Climate is king.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we believe that caring for the community means caring about the climate. You might have heard that we announced a pretty bold 12-month, $2 million campaign to do 4 things. Increase climate literacy, turn up the volume on communities of color in the climate conversation, connect everyday people with the resources they need to survive and thrive, and highlight frontline climate justice crusaders of color throughout this year. KBLA Talk 1580 will be bringing you insightful interviews on all of our shows to help raise your climate IQ. Each quarter this year, we will also be hosting free climate events in various communities throughout the city with food, fun, and forward-thinking conversations. Thanks to partners like LADWP, Metro, Caltrans, the Sierra Club, the California Community Foundation, the California Endowment, AQMD, MWD, and more. You'll also be hearing more about a couple